The damage has been irreparable to our children, right? And in New York City, which you and I care about very much, 50% are now failing their reading exams. 70% are failing their math exams. 1 in 3 children K through 3 can't read at their grade level. New York is now lowering their test standards as a result. All right, and this is, by the way, a state where we spend more per student than any other state in the country, over $25,000 per student, and we're seeing these horrible results. And I think the school closures had a lot to do with it. Obesity is another problem we're seeing. Mental health, you know, the suicide statistics. This tweet, you even acknowledged that remote learning. I can see you squinting. You can't see.
Sorry,
but that's all right. And you tweeted out in 2023, what we have seen in public education is that technology can't replace teachers. Remote education didn't work, in part because you have to have relationships, you have to build trust.
Yes.
But yet, your union continued to advocate for these schools to have triggers to close, to keep them closed, unlike private schools. And by the way, some of that money, that 15% that was spent from that $190 billion, it was not spent to reopen schools. It was spent for CRT, for implicit bias, for anti-racism training, for restorative justice programs, especially in cities like ours, in New York City. Are you disappointed that the funding that was meant to reopen schools were spent on programs like that instead?
Well, first off, let me just say that I, over and over again, as Representative Raskin said, wanted schools to reopen and wanted them to reopen safely. And there were monies that were used in terms of that. We needed far more money in terms of testing and monies that were used in terms of that. The guidance was about the presumption in the guidance, both the Cuomo Commission guidance as well as this, because the Cuomo Commission guidance was what governed New York City, and that guidance was about reopening schools. As to the money spent for programs, my understanding is that under the American Rescue Plan, 20% of that money was for programmatic work. And one of the pieces of programmatic work was curriculum. And another piece was how do we help address the emotional and social needs of kids. And that's what the money was used for.
Okay, so you still, to this day, believe it was a good use of money to use that COVID that was supposed to be meant for reopening schools for CRT and other type of training?
Well, Congresswoman, we don't teach CRT in elementary or middle schools.
I now recognize.
Arguably the greatest tragedy of our time, aside from the fentanyl crisis that is taking the lives of 300 Americans a day, has got to be the decline in academia and learning amongst our nation's youth, especially because of COVID. And I commend Congresswoman Malliotakis for grilling the teachers' unions who are wholly responsible for that decline, that tragic decline in our nation's learning. America's young people are not meeting the standards they must in math, reading, writing, especially civics, because we know our public schools are hardly teaching that anymore. This tragedy, we don't know the impact of it, and we won't for decades to come. But the United States surely will continue to slip when it comes to academia around the globe. We will continue to fall behind our enemies and our allies when it comes to military readiness as well. This is a grave national security concern for our country for the years ahead, and also for our economy too. All because of these far left teachers' unions who care more about protecting systems than children. What a shame.